Hello, everybody. Welcome to Common Censored. I'm Lee Camp, joined by the always amazing Eleanor Goldfield, who refuses to say hello. And we're going to be getting into a lot of the stuff that is not covered on your mainstream media about the U.S. and Israeli invasion, or I guess not invasion yet. It's just bombing the shit out of Iran. But if you actually read sources that matter, it does not appear Iran's exactly losing this. There's a lot of interesting stuff that the mainstream media is not talking about.
Why they're not talking about
I know. Israel, to begin with, Israel bans coverage of just about every strike within Israel. There's been a little bit of it, but not a lot. But this video is showing, there's no real sound to this, but this video is showing that Iran appears to be dropping cluster munitions on Israel that are getting through their supposed Iron Dome. Cluster munitions, munitions. Cluster. Usually, look, there's certain musicians I think should be dropped on countries as a form of punishment.
For the musicians or for the people that they're being dropped on?
Oh, both. But cluster munitions are banned by international law. However, neither Iran nor Israel have signed on to the international law banning them. But this really, I'm pointing this out because it appears Iran is getting through the Israeli defenses far more than you get coverage of on your mainstream media. The coverage in mainstream corporate Western media is just about all of the places that have been hit by the U.S. and by Israel. And there is some coverage of Iran hitting other countries, like U.S. bases in other countries. But I've seen a lot less of the fact that how heavily they seem to be hitting Israel. And we're going to be getting into just a lot of different aspects about this. I wanted to show you, please click thumbs up, everybody. I wanted to show you the amount of money that the U.S. is dumping into this so far. This is Iran.
An estimate, by the way.
Oh, really? We don't know every penny that's dropped.
Well, no, because the Pentagon, this is based on the Pentagon's own report that it estimates it's $1 billion a day. But it's likely far more than that, because why would the Pentagon tell you the full truth?
Right.
But I do think it's fascinating to point out that shakes out to roughly $11.5 thousand a second. So in the time that we've been talking here, I don't know how many seconds we've been live, but a lot. Like $11.5 thousand times however many seconds we've been talking. That's how much money has been spent on a totally unprovoked, terroristic, illegal attack on Iran.
Yeah, and in a few minutes, we'll be getting into kind of what it seems Iran's tactics are and why they very well could prove successful. But before we get to that, I wanted to show just some of the horror show that the U.S. is involved in, such as blowing up this Iranian warship that was in international waters, but it was also unarmed. So to call it a warship, I mean, obviously it was designed for their Navy, but to call it a warship with no arms is a bit much. But
that sentence sounds funny.
With no musicians. They had no musicians on board at the time.
So basically, this was an invitation by India, which included the United States, by the way. That's why the United States was there. And the United States said yes, as did Iran. The sailors had just been on land and been, presented in front of the Indian politicians and everything.
And the U.S. was supposed to take part in this.
Yes. Hold on. I'm getting okay. And then at the last second, the U.S. pulls out of this exercise. This was supposed to be an exercise that, about diplomacy, right? That's why the ship was unarmed, because it was supposed to say, yes, we're using our warships, but we're not going to use them as they were built to be used, because there was a demonstration, collaborative exercise. The U.S. at the last second pulls out of the exercise and torpedoes the Iranian ship. But wait, it gets worse. Then
2,000 miles from Iran.
Then refused to save the sailors as they were drowning.
Yep.
The Sri Lankan Navy was left to collect the bodies.
And of course, it took them a while to get there because they weren't the ones on the scene. So basically, the Sri Lankan Navy eventually gets there and finds there's nothing remaining of the ship. They just find some oil on the top of the water and some surviving sailors. And like, what was it, 100 and 80? So they've recovered 87 bodies. That's not the number who were killed is much higher than that. 87 bodies have been recovered so far. 32 Iranian sailors rescued. But this had nothing to do with the U.S. invasion on Iran. They were not involved in some sort of Iranian military plan. Like, this is just straight up horrific, cowardly horror show. Not somehow it's less cowardly than bombing the children's school where they killed 180 young girls. But America always tries to find ways to top themselves. But just truly horrific shit the United States is involved in. Oh, and what's his name? Bog Breath. Pete Hegseth. He said the sinking illustrates the U.S.-Israeli military operation against Iran is stretching beyond its borders and described the Iranian ship as a prize ship. Basically, great job, folks.
Right.
You killed some unarmed people that were 2,000 miles from what you claim is the country that you're attacking for unknown reasons. Although I've explained it has to do with the petrodollar, it has to do with the waging war on China, and it has to do with, it also seems to have to do with Trump believing, Trump was kind of tricked into believing that Iran was trying to assassinate him, but I think that was only a small factor in his decision to do this unhinged psychopathic bullshit.
But also, I'd like to point out that what we're seeing right now with regards to Iran, with regards to Lebanon, I mean, I think it was Mint Press or the World Health Organization pointed out that U.S. and Israel have already struck 13 hospitals in Iran. All of this is connected directly to what the world accepted that Israel was doing to Gaza. The world governments just basically watched Israel do the most horrific genocide that's still going on in Gaza. And everyone was like, well, that's a bummer, I guess, but we're not going to do anything about it. And so what we're seeing now is really just what you get when you show a complete lack of accountability, when you don't hold genociders accountable for genociding. I mean, again, genociders don't stop. They have to be stopped. And so if this is how you treat them, we should not be shocked. We should be disgusted, but we should not be shocked when we see that genociders genocide.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Israel has gone with impunity, and not just Gaza, but Venezuela proved to Trump that he could just do whatever the fuck he wants. Just completely invading and kidnapping a leader of a sovereign country, and there was no real international pushback against him. So he just said, well, I guess I can do whatever the fuck I want. I want to read some updates from Drop Site News. U.S. and Israeli airstrikes on Tehran and cities across Iran have continued in the seventh day. Huge explosions reported near Tehran University. Witnesses in Tehran told the AP the airstrikes were particularly intense. The death toll in Iran has reached at least 1,332. And this number even shocked me, 30% children. The U.S. and Israel have murdered 30% children in Iran so far. And here's the thing. That number would sound utterly insane if we hadn't already seen the Gazan genocide, where the number was like 48% children. Israel basically set a new bar for what it's like to commit crimes against humanity, to just kill innocent people with that 48% number. The average for modern war is less than 8% children. Because in modern warfare,
that average is going to shift.
Yeah. Prior to Gaza, it was 8% children. Because in modern warfare, like, countries have the ability, the targeting, the knowledge, the intelligence, satellite imagery. They have the ability to target all places that are very likely not to have many children there. Like, you hit a gas refinery to harm a country, the odds of there being kids there are pretty low. Well, but you hit a school.
Well, and also, I think I don't remember which day it was, but Iran basically like targeted certain hotels that members of the U.S. military were staying at, and they targeted like the floor that they're on. So the idea that you can't target someone specifically, I mean, this is what you can do in modern warfare. And of course, Israel tries to sidestep this, and the U.S. as too, of course, by using human shields, which is of course what they accuse the others of doing. Every accusation is an admission, but they use human shields all the time. They will shelter in places and hide in places where the only way to get at them is to bomb civilians. And so I mean, to suggest that you didn't know or you can't avoid it is bullshit. Now, there is also an AI aspect to this, that some information has come out. Like, for instance, there's a park that is roughly translates to police park in Tehran, and that was hit. It has nothing to do with police or any kind of representatives of the state,
really?
But it was targeted. And so this is just one example, but this is leading folks to believe that AI is being used without human oversight, just looking for keywords to target. And of course, this would not be surprising. This is something that we discussed on the show. I believe it was last week. But yeah, I mean, so I would say arguably, like, even when there is human oversight at the moment, it doesn't seem to make a shit bit of difference. But it is, of course, a very disturbing escalation if this is what we're seeing, that we're just handing the robots these like apocalyptically stupid orders and saying, have fun and see what happens.
Yeah. Few more updates before we get into what Iran's strategy seems to be. U.S. and Israel. Sorry, I missed this part. The U.S. and Israeli attacks have damaged 3,643 civilian sites, including over 3,000 homes. U.S. and Israeli officials both suggested on Thursday that strikes on Iran were to escalate. War Secretary Hegseth said at a press conference Thursday that the amount of firepower over Iran and Tehran is about to surge dramatically. And this is because the empire is flailing. I mean, the U.S. and Israel are in many regards losing this battle. I don't mean that it's like a lot of U.S. soldiers are dying, but they're losing it in other ways. Meanwhile, Israeli Army Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Zamir said the Israeli military will intensify the strike on foundations of the regime and its military capabilities. Evidence grows the U.S. is responsible for the deadly strike on the school that has now killed over 180 children. President Trump said on social media that he would only accept unconditional surrender. Iranian strikes hit state oil facilities in Bahrain and many other countries. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said the country is prepared for a prolonged conflict. I mean, they've been prepping for this for fucking decades, and has not yet used many of its newest weapon systems. The IRGC spokesperson said the enemy should expect painful blows in every operational wave, and that new innovations and weapons have not been used at a wide scale. Most of what Iran's firing so far are very cheap drones. It was also reported Thursday that the U.S. and Israel are racing to destroy Iran's missile launchers and drone systems before their own air defense interceptor stockpiles dwindle. And I covered that story on the last live stream about how the U.S. is kind of rushing to accomplish these war goals before their interceptor stockpiles run out, because at that point, basically all U.S. bases and Israel will be sitting ducks because they won't have these interceptor missiles.
I wanted to.
Yeah, let's do the doubles. Let's talk about the double tap strikes that the U.S. has been doing, and then we'll get into what Iran's tactic seems to be, strategy seems to be.
Yeah, so I think that this is important to point out, because again, it connects to the genocide in Gaza, but also speaks to the absolute terroristic and depraved actions of the US and Israel. I mean, say what you will about international law. This is just like some basic humanity that, I mean, that waved bye-bye a long time ago. So basically the double tap strategy, if you will. I mean, I feel like, the Nazis wish they had these ideas. So the first strike is basically to kill an individual or individuals, like in the case of, they use Nasser Hospital in Gaza in August 2025, that killed over 20 people. The second strike comes in rapid succession, but with enough time so that first responders show up. This is one of the reasons that so many first responders have been targeted by Israel and the US, because they show up. Obviously, they're trying to save lives. That's when the US or Israel strikes again. So, for instance, on the Midab Girls' School in southern Iran, it first struck. This was this past Saturday. They first struck, and then a few seconds later, they struck again after first responders, or not, sorry, seconds, but they then struck again, killing even more children and first responders. This has also been done by Israel and Lebanon, not just recently, but years and years ago. So basically, the plan is to kill as many people as possible, but not just people whose job it is to save lives. This is also why Israel has targeted so many doctors, right? And, you know, folks might be familiar with Hind Rajab. Like, not only did they kill her, but they killed the first responders trying to get to her. Israel targets ambulances, which, again, like, whatever, like, of course it's against international law, but it's just against any kind of, like, any kind
of human decency.
Yeah. And so it's like, these are tactics, again, that you can't reason with. You can't sit down at a table and be like, look, I'm trying to meet with you where you're at, but I can't even imagine this level of depravity. You have to stop genociders. You can't wait for them to stop, because this is the kind of behavior that speaks to wanting to be kings of a graveyard and then blowing up the fucking graveyard. Okay. There is no other side to this where they stop and say, that's enough. I've killed enough. I've decimated enough. There is no end to this. Also, because Jesus is not coming. So at no point is this dude, this Palestinian Jew, all of a sudden going to show up and be like, hey, I heard y'all are wanting me to step in. No, that's not fucking happening. So this will not end until somebody ends it. They will never be satisfied that they've killed enough.
And speaking of Jesus coming back, I just put out a Substack column about how the Trump administration is saying privately to the Pentagon and to the soldiers that this is a holy war to bring Jesus back. And
yeah, I didn't just make that up.
Yeah. That's what Eleanor was referencing. So that's free to read, reallycamp.substack.com. I'm not going to go into it now because I don't want to give away all the good stuff. That's reallycamp.substack.com. But yes, there's a holy war aspect of this to it, along with a holy shit aspect to this.
Do you want to get into the speaking of holy war?
Not yet.
Okay. Lee's got all these transitions planned, of which I do not know, and so I have to just kind of.
Well, because she doesn't want to be involved in the production meeting. So I basically sit there alone in a production meeting with myself. I hold up a mirror.
You would.
So I wanted to show this, it's less than 2 minutes, this clip from Professor Zhang in, I believe he's located in China, but he was brought on to the Breaking Point show, and he had a very good analysis. He's one of the few analysts that I've heard actually saying the word petrodollar. Most of these people are either afraid to, or I think there's a lot of people that don't understand it, but there's a lot of people that I think just know that they're not supposed to, I guess, to be on mainstream media. Anyway, but in this clip, this one's not about the petrodollar, but this is about Iran's tactics in the region. And this professor, he predicted that Trump would win the election. He predicted that Trump would invade or attack Iran, start a war with Iran. And his next prediction, which he made years ago, is that, or over a year ago, is that Iran will win this. Basically, the U.S. will lose it. Similar. It's tough to say winning and losing when thousands of people die.
Nobody wins.
Yeah, nobody wins, but essentially the U.S. will lose. The U.S. and Israel will have to back out of this. And anyway, so I just want to play a couple of minutes of why he's saying that and what he says Iran is doing now. I'm going to play it on 1.2 speed. I feel like you guys can handle it. I feel that for you. But I have faith in their understanding.
Given my analysis of how the war is progressing, I think that Iran has many more advantages over the United States. The reality is that right now, it's a war of attrition between the United States and Iran. And the Iranians have been preparing 20 years for this conflict. In their eschatology, in their religion, this is a war against the great Satan. They've had many practice runs. Last June was a 12-day war when the Iranians were able to examine and analyze the strike capacities of both the Israelis and the Americans. And they've had a lot of time, 8 months, to prepare fully for this new attack. They, through their proxies, the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Shia militias, have been able to really grasp the American mentality. And now they have a pretty good strategy of how to weaken and ultimately destroy the American empire. So what the Iranians are doing is they're waging war against the entire global economy. And so they are striking the GCC countries. And not only are they striking GCC countries, American bases, they're going after the critical energy infrastructure of these bases. They blocked off the Strait of Hormuz. And eventually, they will go after the water desalination plants, which is the lifeblood of these nations because they don't have fresh water supply. In fact, the water desalination plant provides 60% of the GCC's water supply. So if a drone, and these drones cost $50,000, if they wiped out a desalination plant in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and it's a city of 10 million people, right? They'd be out of water in 2 weeks.
So that's just a little piece of his analysis, but that's perhaps the most important part. And then he goes on to detail how that would impact the global economy once you start harming these GCC countries. Sorry, I should have said before I played that clip. The GCC is the Gulf Cooperation Council made up of Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. Almost all of those are allies of the United States, or at least to some degree in bed with the United States. But these drones and missiles that they're firing at these various countries housing U.S. military, it's not just, I think a lot of people, especially if you're watching Western media, if you're watching CNN or something, they think Iran is just flailing and just like firing drones at various countries nearby because they don't know what to do. But this is a tactic. This is a plan. And they've cut off the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S., a few minutes later, he goes on to mention that the U.S. economy is a house of cards. And right now, the bubble is inflated by AI. And these AI companies are, they're at the top of the house of cards. So you don't have to pull out very many cards for the whole thing to come down. And the big investors in these massive AI companies that are inflating the U.S. bubble are Saudi Arabia. They are these countries. They are billionaires in these countries. So you start harming these economies, and the European economy is really contingent on the oil supply through the Strait of Hormuz as well, or coming out of Iran in various ways. And it's like all these things start spiraling on each other.
Well,
and
you also
Iran knows this.
You also have Lloyd's of London, which there's a phrase I didn't think I was going to be saying, but you've also got Lloyd's of London, which is one of the largest.
Fucking Lloyd's. You ever met a Lloyd? They're pieces of shit.
Which is one of the largest insurers in the world, basically saying, and even before this started happening, getting insurance to go through the Strait of Hormuz was very difficult. Getting insurance for those ships, because it is such a let's say what's the word?
Unstable,
sticky, unstable, little
hairy,
uncomfortable.
How about a hairy area of the world?
A hairy area.
A hairy area.
Yeah. So even before this bullshit that the U.S. and Israel started doing, it was difficult to get insurance. And now Lloyd's of London is basically saying, we're just not insuring you, which means these massive oil tankers, and Iran has already struck one, which tried to go through after Iran had already announced we're closing this shit down. And then the oil tanker fucked around and found out. But so the idea that they would then go through and potentially get struck and then lose everything if they're not insured, right? Insurance is an aspect that doesn't get a lot of play because it's boring as shit, but it's a very important aspect of the global economy. Same thing with these ships that are sending weapons to Israel. If they can't get insurance, then they're far less likely to go, because it would be such a massive loss for these companies if they were to lose the ship. So this is a very important I mean, and Lloyd's of London is not one to go against like what the UK and what the US are doing. It's just purely interested in capitalism, right? And so this is one of those aspects where you start seeing that, oh shit, actually the US in its massive, speaking of who's flailing, it's the US that's flailing. In its massive, just violent flailing is actually affecting its own ability to stay on top of this hegemonic shit heap that it calls the petrodollar US based global economy. So I think that, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball and I'm certainly not an economist, but this is not going to go well if this continues, because when you have the likes of Lloyd's of London, like one of the world's largest insurers, saying, look, I'm not fucking with that, that is really not going to have a good domino effect on the global economy.
And there's precedent for this, like when insurance starts backing out of oil pipelines in areas because of various things that have interrupted them, like activists, and they don't want to insure them anymore. The companies often are like, well, then we can't fucking put the pipeline in because we need insurance to drop $1 billion there. I wanted to show, let's see, a couple more notes here. This is from Nafeez Ahmed. He does great work on systems analysis, and he's talking about how this is wait, did I lose it? I think it's wrong. Okay, pulled up the wrong page.
I really like your scrolling though. You've got a pretty strong
scroll
finger.
Yeah, scroll finger. You have no idea what I do with my scroll finger.
I really don't want to.
Okay, wait, I think I have it. It's quite a long article.
You know, you have a table of contents over here.
No, that is not what I wanted.
Okay.
Anyway, he makes great points about that the empire is failing, and he talks about the spiraling of the economic situation with Iran going after these kind of linchpins to the economy and the global economy. And that you will see a lot. The U.S. doesn't seem to understand these things. Oh, I finally found it. The feedback loop. The U.S. belief that it can blowback loop. The U.S. belief that it can insulate itself from these repercussions is rooted in systems blindness. And is there anyone more blind to systems than Donald Trump? The inability to see that in a tightly coupled global system, disruptions cascade across every boundary. As the war widens, instability will escalate far outside U.S. control. Prolonged global oil shortages will drive prices higher. Higher prices will feed inflation. Inflation will increase the cost of servicing record debt. Rising debt service costs will compress budgets, strain corporate balance sheets, and trigger the conditions for cascading financial crisis, bursting multiple bubbles across the very industries that sustain Western economic confidence. So the U.S., and this isn't a shock, but the U.S. and these psychopaths, some of them are Jesus psychopaths, but these psychopaths are completely blind to the larger ramifications. Although I will say there's been a lot of reporting that Trump was surrounded by people telling him not to do this. Trump was surrounded by, and generals are psychopaths in their own way, but they did see that Iran had a lot of cards to play, and right now Iran is playing them. But let's talk about one of the most unhinged cards that Israel might play.
I know I'm effing up your transition here, but I wanted to
F up everything.
I wanted to piggyback on that because Matthew Ho has a great Substack, matthewho.substack.com. He's a Marine veteran and a veteran of the State Department and just a really great human being who I've had on Project Censored several times. But he, back before the U.S.-Israel strike on Iran, had written about just what you were talking about and basically saying like what would be the ramifications if the Strait of Hormuz were closed because Donald Trump attacked Tehran. And he, of course, pointed out, well, gasoline prices, but also he said the continuing devaluation of the American dollar, the continuous flight from American treasuries, a continuing pursuit of alternatives to the American monetary and financial and economic world order. And that will, of course, have effects on us. And he points out, what's it going to be like when we don't have the world's reserve currency anymore? What's it going to be like when nations aren't lining up around the block to buy our treasuries to fund our debt? And so, again, like this is all linked to, what Lee's talked a lot about was just the petrodollar. But this is not a way to defend it, right? This is just once again proving to nations that, wow, you're unstable. The US is like so out. If it's like a guy on PCP and whiskey at a bar and you're like, why would I invest in that? That's insane. So this is actually pushing people to do the opposite, even if they're not, the Gulf countries or things like that, just in general. So I think that that's, another thing to point out. And again, this coming from somebody who's himself worked at the State Department.
Okay, now let's get to, now that you've ruined my transition, let's get to one of Israel's unhinged possible plans. I really hope that they don't use this one, but...
Well, so this was actually something that one of the listeners suggested that we cover, so thanks. Know that y'all can throw out suggestions.
We will ignore most of them, because screw you guys. No, I'm kidding.
So this is, like, I can't even believe, like, sometimes... things are just so fucking insane that you're like, I can't believe this is a thing. And I need to wake up. So I was aware of this before bringing it up today. And I talked about it a little bit here and there and on Project Censored. It's called the Samson option. And for those of you who are lucky enough to never have had to read about Samson in the Bible, it's named after the biblical myth of Samson, who supposedly collapsed the pillars of a Philistine temple on himself and his enemies, killing both in the process.
And that's a win. Go Samson. Murder everyone.
Yeah. So basically, this option that Israel has. Now, first of all, I should point out that Israel has never admitted to having nuclear weapons, but everybody knows that they do. Okay, so we'll just start there. If we want to talk about like transparency and not allowing inspectors in, and
I know they just pretend they don't even have them.
I mean, like, again, every accusation is an admission. If there's somebody in the region that is being super shifty and shady about nuclear weapons, that would be Israel, whom again we know already has nuclear weapons. Some people place it around 90. It's not really clear because again, they won't fucking admit it. I'm shaking the table. Well, these are shaky times, folks. So basically, this after October 7th, there were several Israeli politicians who talked about nuking Gaza, which would essentially be using the Samson option, because if you nuke Gaza, I don't know if you've looked at a map, but supposed Israel is like, it's right there.
But also they've already dropped like 6 Hiroshima bombs on Gaza,
I know.
So it's
I know.
Essentially they nuked it long term.
Well, right, but of course there's a difference between all at once.
Yes.
And, okay.
Yes.
Even prior to that, you had folks like the Zionist extremist Sheldon Adelson talking about nuking Tehran. And as we've just talked about, Israel and the US are greatly underestimating Iran's ability to fight back. And so a lot of people right now are saying, well, because they are perhaps realizing, oh shit, this is going to be deeper and more intense than we thought because we're arrogant pieces of shit. Will they be tempted to use the Samson option if they feel that they're losing this war that they started? Instead of backing off, will they literally kill themselves and take the world with them? Now, the other thing here is that we tend to think, at least people like me who are not in their 20s or younger, we grew up with this feeling of mutually assured destruction, right? That was like the Cold War idea that if you use a nuclear weapon, that it's just, Russia's going to fire back and then it's all over and you're all living in, like that Viggo Mortensen film, The Road, right?
Because for a long time, there was a guarantee between Russia and the US that they would do that to each other.
Right. By the way, it now seems like an apt time to point out that the only fuckers who have been insane enough to ever use the nuclear weapon twice is the US. Okay.
Yeah.
So the issue...
And we didn't need to. If you'd like to learn more about that, check out my other podcast, Government Secrets. Anyway.
So basically, the other issue with this is that nuclear weapons are no longer this kind of like, oh, you press the button and it's nuclear winter for the world. There's a class of nuclear weapons that are considered low yield, which means that you could see a future where smaller nukes, which feels like an oxymoron, because there is no real small nuke, but where smaller nukes are used to address things like a simple misunderstanding, right? Because you are at this, I'm serious,
between a husband and wife.
Simple
misunderstanding.
You are at this level of biblical, truly, at this level of biblical rage and, again, apocalyptic dumb shittery. Like, it is a level of dumb that is apocalyptic. And so the question then becomes, does the Samson option not even just relate to, oh, we're going to do a murder suicide, but perhaps maybe just a little bit of a murder suicide because we've got these low yield nuclear weapons? So this is absolutely terrifying because, of course, we see what Israel's already doing in the region, and obviously doesn't seem to give a shit even about its own people who are, in bunkers and have been subject to some of these, what was it, cluster musicians.
Yeah.
So
what it is you fire one musician, and then in the sky it breaks into a bunch of other musicians, usually a boy band of sorts, and that then lands in the country, and everyone gouges their ears out.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a creative weapon.
I mean, the element of surprise, certainly. So yeah, basically the Samson option is an apocalyptically dumb idea that although it's never been officially put into like policy, because it's never been officially admitted that Israel has nukes, this is something that has been bandied about in policy discussions behind closed doors. And Seymour Hersh wrote a book about it in 1991 that outlines a lot of not just like the outline of this option, but how Israel went about getting nuclear weapons and how shady they've been and Again, this was 1991. So yeah, this is one of the things that's on the table, so to speak. And clearly Israel is not,
yeah, it's horrifying, but everything Israel does is horrifying.
Well, yes.
Just wanted to bring you a little bit more about how Israel and the United States is kind of losing this battle, as opposed to what you hear on Western media. This is from the 307 Substack. Trump and Netanyahu made clear at the beginning of the war their hope was that the murder of Ayatollah Khomeini and other leading Iranian government officials would lead to mass defections and a mass uprising in Iran that would lead to regime change. I mean, they made that quite clear, and yet Iran knew they were going to do this. And in fact, the Ayatollah never actually hid. He was killed in his office. He just kept doing his normal day-to-day, and he was like, if they kill me, they kill me. What?
I just wanted to add one more thing, is that in the so-called Yom Kippur War in 1973, where Israel actually almost lost, they threatened to use nuclear weapons. And this, I mean, I believe part of Hersh's point here is that this was used basically like as blackmail for Nixon to help them out. But so this also suggests and proves that Israel has had nuclear weapons for a bit, right?
Oh yeah,
and has also threatened to use them for a long time. So this is also for the crowd that like, oh man, Netanyahu's just a baddie, and if we got him out of no, Israel is the baddie.
And the U.S. and Israel have pretended as if there's this mass, support in Iran for, taking down the current government and replacing it. But in fact, after they murdered the Ayatollah, there have not been mass celebrations because, believe me, if there were, you would see a lot of video of it because Mossad is in Iran on the ground. You're telling me they couldn't get a video out of 1 million people celebrating the death of Ayatollah Khomeini? Instead, what you've seen is really a rallying around the flag. Like, people that don't like the Iranian government are also like, hey, but don't bomb the shit out of our country. Don't blow up schoolhouses and kill small children. We may not like the Ayatollah, some of us, but we don't fucking want you invading us either. Despite calls from Trump, let's see, this is from a senior research fellow at the Center for Middle East Strategic Studies. Despite calls from Trump for Iranians to take back their country from Iran's leaders, the U.S. and Israeli strikes appeared to be driving many to rally around the flag instead. Iran, the officials say, was prepared for this conflict. The command structures built to survive a decapitation strike, which is what the U.S. and Israel did, appeared to remain substantially intact, allowing Iranian retaliatory strikes against Israel, Qatar, and Bahrain to begin within hours of the initial attacks. And inside the country, since the conflict started, Iranians have reported a heavier security presence in city streets, with paramilitary forces patrolling on motorbikes. But despite the intensity of the strikes and the broad nature of the destruction, so far there are no reports of significant defections within regime ranks, despite what Trump would like us to believe. One European official describing government briefings on the latest assessments of the strength of the Iranian regime said there's not a single sign of anything in the system breaking or defecting. Nothing. Zero. Iran's military and political command has proved durable because of the layered system that they put in place. Having utterly failed to achieve regime change in Iran, the U.S. and Israel are now, and this is the funniest one, you've probably heard reports on CNN and other places about this, but that the U.S. and Israel now are considering arming the Iranian Kurdish groups based inside Iraq to act as their proxy forces, boots on the ground in Iran. But Iraq's national security advisor said the country will not allow any groups based on Iraqi soil to cross the border into Iran to carry out acts of terror, especially as the Islamic Republic is fighting off the U.S.-Israeli aggression. And the Kurdish First Lady of Iraq said she rebuked the plot and said, today the Kurds of Iraq have finally tasted a measure of stability and dignity in life. Because of this, it is very difficult, indeed impossible, for Kurds to accept being treated as pawns. Because, do you really think the U.S. will be there for you, considering they've already, in the past, allowed the Kurds to be gassed and murdered? Treated as pawns by the world's superpowers. The experiences are there. The empty promises are there. Too often, the Kurds are remembered only when their strength or sacrifice is needed. For that reason, I appeal to all sides involved in the conflict. Leave the Kurds alone. We are not guns for hire.
Doesn't it suck to spend that much time and money on taking over Iraq, and then they're just like, no, dude, not helping you?
Oh, you mean the Iraqi government? I was like, which time, who, what?
Right. Well,
yes,
exactly. How many times has the U.S. invaded Iraq? And yet still Iraq's like, just no. Like, I'm sorry you spent billions of dollars killing all of us.
This is part of the folly of the U.S. plan in many countries is we will collapse the country. We'll murder, in Iraq was about 1 million people, and we'll put in a puppet. But the problem is the moment you aren't backing that with guns, guess what the people generally do? They generally replace the puppet with someone they actually support. That person sometimes has a mind of their own, usually does. And all of a sudden, you're back to square one with a country that doesn't support you.
Sounds a bit like Iran, actually.
Yeah. The revolution, yeah.
I mean, because look, y'all, we wouldn't be in this position if it weren't for the U.S. overthrowing Mossadegh. So it's like
Mossadegh, yeah.
I mean, yeah, Iraq, Iran,
But this time around, it's going to be better, according to Trump. It's going to be different because Trump has demanded to choose the next Iranian supreme leader. He says it's he who gets to approve of the next leader. This is a classic psychopath, right? You haven't won the war.
Away from his face, please.
Yeah, it's tough though. You haven't. It takes up so much of the screen. You haven't won the war. You are actually, in many ways, losing this war, and yet you're demanding to pick their next leader. Explain that to me. But this is what a psychopath does. Everything's about him. It doesn't matter whether he's winning. There's no accountability. So I also found, I'm not going to go through this entire immense article, but the gray zone is, I think that the reason we're invading Iran or whatever, obliterating Iran right now in this horrific way is there's many reasons behind it, why it happened this moment. The deepest reason has to do with the petrodollar and the flailing U.S. empire. But there's also other reasons as to why now, such as Donald Trump desperately needs to cover up Epstein revelations. Israel is pushing harder than ever. But here's another one as to why this minute we're doing this. The Gray Zone is reporting that Israel and the FBI manipulated assassination plots to goad Trump into the Iran war. So apparently, according to several reports, Trump actually believed these reports coming from the FBI and Israeli connected people that the assassination, that there was an assassination attempt on him that was set up by Iran. And if you actually go through this article, of course, it's all bullshit. It had to do with the FBI. The one Iranian guy involved was like an FBI. Basically, he didn't have the plot at all, except the FBI pretended to be his friend and basically talked him into the plot, but he didn't have any way to execute the plot either. So he doesn't have the ability. He didn't even have the thought. But the FBI is like, here's a great idea. Here's the money to pretend. Here's the guy to call. And he tries to do it. And then they go, oh, he was going to kill the president. It's all bullshit. But
it's like when they say that Hezbollah's at the U.S.-Mexico border and you're like, the what? What? How the hell did they get over there?
Yeah, yeah. But the FBI is known for this. Just about every terror plot that has happened or attempted on U.S. soil has been somehow connected to the FBI. I mean, almost every fucking one. It really is incredible how and someone's done years ago, like 5 years ago, there was a study and it was like 96% of all terror plots are connected to the FBI on US soil. And so anyway, Trump apparently did believe that some of these plots that were out to get him were connected to Iran, even though the truth is it was just Israel and the FBI basically manipulating him.
Again, every accusation is an admission.
I know. So yet another reason as to why now. I think a lot of people are wondering why now. Is since the U.S. has been trying to go after Iran for years, but has never been dumb enough to do this until right now. Let's see. Do you want to go to talk about Lebanon for a few minutes, or what did you want to talk about?
I don't know.
Oh, well, we also got
driving the boat bus,
the boat bus,
the duck boat.
Don't put me on a duck boat. Those things kill people. Actually, I should pause here to tell you guys that if you feel like you're getting anything out of this live stream, it would really be amazing if you could join up at realleecamp.substack.com or patreon.com/leecamp or say things, talk.
What are we talking about?
Your pages. What are your pages? Eleanor went to her happy place there for a minute.
I wish. It's fine. It's harder and harder to find one. My stuff, I have a Substack, eleanorgoldfield.substack.com. I also have artkillingapathy.com where you can find all of my work. And I do Project Censored. It's a weekly show that airs on Pacifica, but also online. You can check that out at projectcensored.org or wherever you listen to podcasts.
And I have live shows in to wait for the woo to end in LA and New York coming up in a couple months. Grab your tickets now, people. Los Angeles, May 13th, 7:30 p.m. Lyric Hyperion Theater. That's at leecamp.com/schedule. Or New York City, June 5th, 9 p.m. at the Cobra Club. The one in Los Angeles is with John F. O'Donnell from Redacted Tonight. The one in New York is with both Naomi Caravani and John F. O'Donnell from Redacted Tonight. Live show, very affordable tickets. May 13th, Los Angeles, June 5th, New York City. These are not gigantic venues. I'm playing leecamp.com/schedule. So if you're thinking of getting tickets, I would go ahead and get them because they will sell out. The last one sold out in New York. So. All right, let's move on to talk for at least a moment about Lebanon before we get to the MMA fighter that will soon be our head of Homeland Security.
Basically everything. And apologies if I'm saying this incorrectly, but this week Israel gave some people are calling it an evacuation order. I'd like to just point out that you can't issue an evacuation order for a place that you're currently bombing. This is a ethnic cleansing warning and a forced displacement warning. And anything else is journalistic malpractice. So again, we are the most propagandized people on the planet. It's important to call this shit out. It's like, these are just like, it's not a detention center, it's a goddamn concentration camp. So basically, Israel gave this forced displacement warning for everything south. And again, sorry if I'm mispronouncing this, the Litani River. And basically this has caused absolute mayhem. I mean, and we saw this in Gaza as well. Again, the playbook is very, very rinse and repeat, right? Not even rinse, just repeat. And it's absolute mayhem. I was reading from a Lebanese journalist who said that, you know, there's no way to get to people who are in, for instance, the suburbs that are elderly or disabled. There's no way to evacuate them. I mean, cars are to standstill. Israel also spoke of a safe corridor, which again, you might recall from Gaza. There's no such thing as a safe corridor. Everything is a target. Everyone is a target. The more vulnerable you are, the more targetable you are.
And imagine you've lived in this place for, 20, 30, 40 years. Your elderly parents are there. What are you going to do? Are you going to flee your house every time Israel says, oh, we might just be bombing everyone? Oh, okay, great. Well, let's go live somewhere else for a while. Like, the idea that this is acceptable or like, okay, I think we live here in the United States and we're like, act like this shit is fine. Oh, Israel, well, they gave them an evacuation order. That's still a war crime. You can't just tell people to leave and then bomb the shit out of their country. It's a fucking war crime. It's a crime against humanity. And we need to stop acting like it's somehow nice. Oh, well, they gave them an evacuation order before they genocided them.
Yeah, an evacuation order, by the way, is like what the authorities will give you if you're at risk of a wildfire or some shit. That's an evacuation order. You can't give an evacuation order for a place you're bombing. Because if you just didn't do the thing, the evacuation order, so-called, would be totally unnecessary. These are ethnic cleansing warnings. And by the way, they're ethnic cleansing warnings that the ethnic cleansing has already happened. I mean, tens of thousands of people have already left these areas of Lebanon because of Israel's bombing, which, by the way, has been pretty continuous since the so-called ceasefire, right? Israel has broken that so-called ceasefire
15,000 times.
Yeah, exactly. So
it's been a ceasefire basically for Hezbollah. Hezbollah has not broken it until we started bombing Iran. Israel broke it 15,000 times.
So again, it's not really that Israel's starting to bomb Lebanon again. They just never stopped. And of course, this is an escalation. It's again the flailing and the flailing aspect, which you see with the U.S. as well. But Israel's flailing as well. And so this is horrific. And these reports come from like a day or two ago, but already you've got 60,000 people who have tried to evacuate. And of course, this is while bombs are still being dropped in the area. So it's, in shelters that are trying to take care of people are at capacity. People are trying to move by foot, carrying what little they can. I mean, it's absolute mayhem. And and also, there has been Israel has also targeted an empty hotel in a Christian area in an effort to sow fear and fan the flames of sectarianism. So they're also trying to foment infighting, right? To ensure that the focus is not on Israel, or that things are such mayhem that people can't focus on Israel. So these are the tactics we saw in Gaza, we've seen in the West Bank, and they're being played out in Lebanon as they have been played out in Lebanon before, right? It's not like Lebanon is a new target of Israel by any means. I also just want to really quick point out that as so much of the focus is on Iran and some of it on Lebanon, although a lot less, there's basically no focus on Gaza, certainly not on the West Bank. And the ethnic cleansing in the West Bank and the genocide in Gaza have not stopped. They've just escalated because they're using this attack on Iran to basically make sure that nobody's paying attention. Crossings into Gaza have closed. There was one On Tuesday, Israel opened up one crossing into Gaza and let in 16 trucks for 1.7 million people. 16 fucking trucks.
The estimate of trucks needed to feed the people is over 1,000 per day.
They let in 16. It's estimated that roughly 22,000 Palestinians in Gaza need immediate evacuation for medical support. In the West Bank, the continued attacks by settlers has risen. It's also ramped up that these are in conjunction with the military because of this war.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah.
Joyce in the chat says, what about Rafah? The Rafah crossing, yeah, well, it's closed, but the Rafah crossing used to be a crossing between Gaza and Egypt. It did not involve Israel. However, Israel has taken over the land around the Rafah crossing. So now that crossing is from Israel, or Israel-occupied territory, from Israel to Egypt. So the IDF has control of that crossing. There is no, even if Egypt were to say, yep, open it up, Israel controls that crossing now.
Well, and even when it was quote unquote open, I think we covered this on the show too.
Yeah.
Even when it was quote unquote open, it wasn't. The Israel agreed to let a certain number of people through a day. That was a gross overestimate based on what they actually let through, and they, the amount of honestly torture that people were subjected to in order to go through this crossing was grotesque. So no, there are no open crossings into or out of Gaza as of now. And even when there were quote unquote open ones, they weren't open in any understanding of the word open that a normal human being would have. So it's important to note the domino effect that this terroristic apocalyptic attack on Iran is having in the region. Lebanon, the West Bank, and Gaza. Israel is really using this in order to try and destroy as many fronts as they possibly can.
Yeah. And then the last thing before we wrap up here, Trump has fired the head of DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem.
Don't get too excited, though.
Yeah, don't get too excited. Did you actually think he'd replace her with someone competent?
Yeah, the replacement is Mamdani.
And the replacement is an ex-MMA fighter.
Who, by the way, has no experience in any of the things that DHS does. So for folks who don't know, both FEMA and ICE, CBP, a lot of agencies are under the DHS blanket. Now, riddle me the irony of FEMA being in the same cohort as ICE, I know. But so this guy is an idiot. I mean, everybody in Trump's circle is a fucking idiot. But this guy has absolutely no experience. In a recent speech that he was giving, he mistook Iran for Iraq. Didn't even know the difference. Like, he said it out loud. So yeah, this is
and
this is who we're dealing with.
And not that it would matter really if you had experience working with the police state, but he has zero experience with Department of Homeland Security, with ICE, with policing, with any of it. Now it's tough to say. Would you rather have an idiot with no experience in that position, or one who's like, I've been working with police my whole life?
Well, it's kind of like
maybe idiocy is our friend here.
It's kind of like how atheists oftentimes are really good at being able to quote the Bible and shit. I believe that it's good to know how these systems work in order to dismantle them more effectively. Now, of course, that's not at all what he's trying to do, but I'm not the kind of person that thinks that knowledge is pointless. So the idea that he shouldn't have any experience is not actually an argument that I'm willing to engage in, because I think that, again, no knowledge is bad. But this guy has zero net knowledge and about really anything, it seems, about politics, which he apparently is engaged in. So
his name is Mark Wayne Mullen, and it seems, is Mark and Wayne one word? But Mark Wayne Mullen, a Republican senator from Oklahoma, former MMA fighter and former plumber, who would be the next DHS secretary. His nomination seems unlikely to face much resistance in the Republican-controlled Senate. Mullen is a close Trump ally. But I do love that Trump is clearly using the movie Idiocracy as like a guide.
Dude.
Because look up the President of Idiocracy if you have not seen that movie recently. Literally just MMA fighter. Sure, why not?
And I just want to point out, this is not knocking the idea that a plumber should be a politician or should run for Congress. I mean, Maduro was a former bus driver. I'm not knocking the idea that somebody who has worked menial jobs or worked with their hands or construction or anything like that shouldn't have access to the levers of power. Absolutely. I actually think more workers should. But it is the proud ignorance, the pride in being a dumb fuck that is the problem. So the problem is not that this dude was a plumber. I don't even really think that the problem is that he was an MMA fighter, but I do think that there's some issues there, daddy issues or whatever the hell. But like, it's not even that, right? The issue is that he's a piece of shit, and he's a dumb piece of shit that's proud of being a dumb piece of shit. That is the problem.
Pride and ignorance.
Exactly. So I think, and he has actually been very anti-union. Apparently he, on the floor of the Senate last year, I believe it was, or 2 years ago, he tried to attack the leader of a union, and Bernie Sanders, who was like holding the gavel at the time, had to like bang the gavel and remind this piece of shit that he's a US senator. So he would stop trying to actually physically attack this union leader. So again, it is important to recognize that like workers are not a monolith. And also the problem isn't that this guy had like a regular Joe kind of job.
But of course, why is this guy being selected? He's being selected. Basically, Trump selects people that suck him off the most. So if you are thoroughly, if you are thoroughly in bed with Trump, then that's who you get. That's who you select. Doesn't matter whether they have any education on the issue. Whether they're have pride and ignorance or not, sure, why not? All right, but we are going to wrap up this show. I do these live streams 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
I do them once a week.
Eleanor joins me only on Fridays because she's too good for the other days. So I would love for you to join us more often. But most importantly, if you feel like you got just one fucking beer, just a beer's worth out of this show, please join up at realleecamp.substack.com, or leecamp.net is my locals community. You can post your own stuff there. You can be part of the community at leecamp.net. And I'm on Patreon as well. But let's see. Oh, and the podcast, if you're more of a listener, the podcast is called Common Censored, and it's on all your podcast platforms. Thanks a lot. Have I missed anything?
I don't think so.
Now she gets quiet.
EleanorGoldfield.substack.com, artkillingapathy.com, and Project Censored is wherever you listen to podcasts.
All right, folks, have a good weekend and keep fighting.